patterns of the you can select from free RC Creation Center format with hundreds of grammar and spelling mistakes. So in case you want to just review spelling mistakes, right? Or post format where all the TLAs have muted capitalizations. Ask what our premium version should also post underneath the discussions. I imagine both that Jack voice and then Jim, with things popping up. April 1, like they I just do signatures. I had no call in the description, so I have I don't see why. You would get to see if we can get my
Get there so early morning tomorrow.
When you put dot star in your thing, or just first letter dot star. Oh, it's all broken. Your house has died. Yeah. It's okay. See it. It's of course it's died. You can list all. And maybe take it home and take it out.
All right, we'd like to get started here. If we can settle down. All right, welcome everyone to COSE, our last session of the last day. For those of you paying attention, let's see. So unless this is your first day here, I'm pretty sure you've seen the note well, but if not, please take note of this. It is important to, especially for the group working on things related to cryptography. IPR disclosures are very important and very critical to us, so please consult the relevant BCPs. So as part of our administrivia, a reminder that a minute taker, do we have anyone willing to volunteer for taking minutes? All we're really looking for are action items and like broad conclusions that the chairs will call out to you. We don't need a blow by blow. Thank you. Thank you, Michael. In JabberScribe, we have Francesca taking that. So that will be anything that needs to be relayed into the room. If we can't do it, if for whatever reason MediaEcho isn't working or is inconvenient. We have the MediaEcho links and the links to all the materials, all the slides that we'll have today. All right, so Here's our agenda. We've already gone through most of our administration, but we'll be covering the BIS drafts, hash algorithms, X509 from Jim, and then wrap up with Mike Jones and WebAuthn. And if we stick to the time, we should be out of here pretty quick. So any bashing of this agenda? All right, so let's move on. I think that's it for our slides. The one document we'll note is the hash signatures document is an AD evaluation. The AD evaluating it has switched from Benjamin to Roman. Thank you, Roman. So we should be able to start advancing that here soon. Jim.
You're hiding. Okay. This actually probably won't take very long at all. You want to put me in full screen?
Thought we were.
There we go. So first of all, the document that is on its way, hopefully, to becoming a real standard. This is a set of open issues that I listed at the last meeting. I believe that they are all finished. So everything should be there. For the continent, for the canonical encoding, I just basically went through and made sure everything was cleanly said and actually ended up removing the reference entirely in terms of that particular piece. We still potentially have the downref issue. We don't know how fast the CBOR-based document is actually going to get out. It is not moving nearly as fast as what this document is. So we may still end up having to argue with the ISG about that particular downref. But I don't think it should be a big issue as we're doing the most basic CBOR stuff. Interop status. One of the things we have to do is convince the IESG that we actually do have interop. So far, I have found 8 different implementations, 3 of which are mine, all of which are actually up on GitHub. Interestingly enough, almost everybody does signing, and almost nobody does encryption. I'm not really too sure why that is true, because when I wrote my code, I started with encryption. It probably has to do with what people actually need in the real world. And I basically just went through and read code in terms of trying to figure out what people were doing. So this may actually change as I find other stuff and whatnot.
Justin Richard, just a quick note, that parallels the Jose world, where just about everybody does JWS. Most people don't do JWE. And even in the classes that I teach on OAuth and Jose, I teach JWS and say, if you want to do JWE, go read it or something. Yeah, go. That's an exercise at home. So this is not at all surprising to me, because in the real world, that seems to be where most of the use cases are driving, is signatures.
Question, Jim. Michael Richardson, is sign one and sign generally, are they both implemented, or is it mostly just sign one?
Almost everyone implements both.
Okay.
Because they don't know which one they're going to want. And once you've done the full sign one kind of just falls out without thinking about it. A lot of people will only let you sign with one person, but they actually have the code to do both.
I think the point of my question, actually, to that point, is whether or not users should be specific, or protocol users, that is, should be specific about we accept sign one and only sign one, or you should accept the generality of both structures, which may only be signed by one entity. because there's a little bit of subtlety in the verification code if it's there. And if you don't need it, you don't have to have it. But on the other hand, if everyone's implementing it, then maybe protocol users should be a little bit liberal about which one they deal with. Michael Richardson again.
For your own notes.
Jim, I was wondering, the slide says Interop Status, and then you talk about reviews of implementation. Did you do Interop of these different implementations, or what was done?
I have not managed to actually get Interop Status on all of them yet. I've started, and the first thing I started with was which ones do I want to play with, because which ones are the most complete.
Which implementations did you investigate? Did you post that somewhere? Because I'm curious on whether ours.
I have not posted it someplace. Some of it is posted in the structure document because there's a section that talks about implementations, and I need to get that posted someplace. I'm intending to put it up on the GitHub site, but I haven't done so. And no, yours is not one of them.
Do you want the chairs to set up a wiki or something to track this?
Would it be appropriate, phrased another way, would it be appropriate to use the wiki, either the IETF wiki or the GitHub wiki on the project for doing this tracking?
I was planning to use the wiki on the GitHub, but I don't think it actually makes a big difference. In terms of interop testing, almost every implementation I've seen actually pulls down the examples from the example repository. So half the job of testing for interop is probably already done. That is, everybody can already verify stuff that I signed or stuff that I encrypted. It's just a question of making sure that the opposite direction works as well. Going forward, I think we're ready for last call. I have no open issues on this. I don't know of anything that is outstanding that stopped the document itself from progressing. It's just a question of getting a sufficient amount of interop for the IESG. Questions?
Okay. All right. I mean, speaking for myself, this is Matthew Miller. I mean, I've read through the structure and ALGS document. I know we're talking about structure right now. And it seems fine to me. I will submit to you the editorial notes I have within a few days.
Okay. The algorithms draft. This is basically the other half of what the original document was. Basically, the things that I said I was going to do in Prague, I went through and did. And I think this document should be ready to go to working group last call. There is one interesting question which we may want to consider, and I think is a good thing to consider during the working group last call, which is, do we want this document on standards track or should it be an informational document? I'm agnostic towards that. Does anyone want to venture an opinion?
Justin Richard, since you can't really use COSE without having the specifics of an algorithm, why would this not be a standards track document?
Well, I have zero intention of ever trying to progress this to a full standard.
Okay, but I mean, most of what the IETF spits out never goes to full standard anyway because nobody cares.
Yeah, I have some personal opinions about that.
Okay. That's fine. I'm just saying the perception from the outside. Well, one perception from the outside world doesn't care if it's informational, standards track, or experimental. It's just a thing that exists. And if it's got an RFC number, it must be good. But from a more philosophical perspective, seeing that this is fairly important and core stuff, I don't see a compelling argument for being informational. Incidentally, this same argument is also why in the first iteration of the COSE working group, which I co-chaired, that's why we had it in a single document instead of splitting it out, because the two are inextricably linked. You can use the structure with new algorithms, yes, but you have to have an algorithm somehow. And so saying that the algorithms are somehow less than standard just feels really funny to me. But I'm not here to relitigate the document splitting. I understand that that bad decision has already been made here. Fine. But that's kind of where I land on what this ought to be.
Ben Kadok, yeah, I'm kind of sympathetic to that, Justin. But of course, do think that the separate documents is good because we change algorithms more often than we change protocols, and it's good to have agility for that.
Ben, I hate to ask you to stay, but do you have any particular concerns about this being informational versus standards track, or?
I mean, so just in terms of process-wise, it's a whole lot easier to start off targeting standards track and then move it to informational than it is to go the other way around. If you have to do a whole new IETF last call, et cetera, et cetera. So like that's sort of my gut feeling is to keep it or to put it as standards track for now.
I largely and I agree. I can't see why it wouldn't. It's just a label. Everything else happens the same way. And is some of your reluctance that you believe that by the time we get to step 2, that the algorithms will have changed and let's start all over again? Or is your reluctance bigger architectural IETF thing?
Well, I mean, I would never progress this one up because if one of the algorithms does go bad, you have to basically rerun the whole thing up to full standard.
Right. It's I'm saying every time the numbers change, you have to redo it. So, I have to look and see what the IPsec working group's recommendations with our should pluses and minuses, how that worked, whether we put informational or standard. I never thought about it. Okay, to be honest, you could probably look it up in the thing, but I don't know if some people are probably not familiar with that, but we extended must and should and stuff to have must plus and must minus and should plus and should minus. And that basically means these are algorithms which we're thinking about deprecating. If they have minuses, they're going on the way down. And if they have pluses, they're going on the way up. You should think about them becoming mandatory. And I think we've revved that about approximately every 5 or 7 years. I've got about 3 revs of it now. And, the original one said triple des plus, okay, must plus, single des, may. And at this point, it says triple des, may, minus, single des must not, and, AES, various things, with various levels of must and plus, right?
Yeah.
So you can see how that processes over time.
Yeah, I mean, we did exactly the same thing with the S- specifications.
Okay.
And I've never thought about trying to progress those up to full standard because since they got algorithm recommendations in them, we rev them on a, not every year basis, but, in the last 20 years, I think we're now on the 5th or 6th version.
Right. So I think that's just fine. So
yeah.
So put it standards track. It's not going to get step 2, and that's okay.
Okay. So I will be asking for working group last call on this.
Right. So working group last call for struct and for ALGs.
The document that is to be done, or actually I'm not too sure if it's how we actually wrote it in the charter, for new algorithms. So far we've had one. Only one person has actually said, I really want this algorithm. If it's only one, hey, I can do that really fast. I can do that by Singapore and we can be finished. If other people really want us to put in other algorithms, I really want to hear about it. Yeah, let me know. Otherwise, we can basically say when new algorithm documents are needed, we'll just go ahead and let them be AD sponsored. The X519 certificate document. Basically, everything that we talked about at the last meeting, most of it basically is, after I thought about it for a while, I don't think we need to do it. So I didn't write it into any of the documents. We have had one person ask for an early assignment of the code points for this because they're actually going to start doing some interop testing in about 3 weeks. And then if we actually have real numbers, they would prefer to use real numbers than to use made up numbers for that purpose. I actually intended to push examples for this up to the repository, and I ended up with problems with OpenSSL in terms of trying to generate certificates for things like X25519, because of course you can't actually create a CSR with it. So they have some funky language for command switches, which I haven't managed to figure out how to get to work correctly. I need to actually sync up my version of OpenSSL and rebuild it in debug mode and try to figure out what I'm doing wrong. One of the big issues that I talked about was defining a new COSE key type. I actually, in my code base, said, no, I'm just going to have a parameter which says, how do you create a COSE key from this public key? And I've found that to be sufficient, so I don't think we actually need to carry them separately. The places where we actually may want to do this is in the ACE working group, in the POP draft. There's a way to define a way to carry things there, and it would make sense for us to be able to carry X509 certificates at that point. Karsten.
Carsten Bowman, I have a clarifying question.
Yes.
What is the CBOR content type?
Oh, that should be it should be a co-op content type, sorry.
A content format number.
Yes.
I think we should make it a habit of simply defining these whenever we stumble over them.
Well, I'd like to actually have at least a vague idea of what I'd use it for. And there are content types defined for just a bare, it would make sense potentially to define a content type for a bare X509 certificate, but not for one of these, not for a bag of certificates maybe. But we would want to define the content types that match up to the current contents that exist. I thought at one point you were planning to do a draft for that.
I haven't looked into the issue. I just wanted to state as a general principle, when you touch one of these things, you do a content format registration because you might need it, and unless you have a reason to believe you don't.
Yeah, I could certainly add that in. That's not that difficult to do. Any other questions on this page? So obviously, if I do the content stuff, then that's one revision before we do the working group last call. But I would still like to get the early adoption of the code points for the COSE attributes done. So if there's no objections, I'd like to just go to IANA and tell them to register them, since I'm one of the expert reviewers on that registry. I take that back. I'm not an expert reviewer on that registry. Which means I guess we should kind of be a little bit more formal. And we'll have to talk to the AD to find out exactly how fast we can run that. Any other questions? Okay, I will have a new draft out within 2 weeks.
Okay, thank you. At least regarding these 4 drafts that we've just kind of blasted through, the chairs have talked about it, and where we're leaning is we'll issue a working group last call for the biz drafts immediately, either today or by Monday. And then the other ones, mostly for our own sanity, on the reviews, hold those off for 1 or 2 weeks so that we can get ourselves a cadence.
I might suggest that a 4-week process due to vacation schedules may be reasonable.
Okay, we'll do a if we can record that in minutes. We'll look at a 4-week working group last call, or 4-week schedule for these. So 2 weeks. Let that finish the next 2 weeks. Is that?
No, I was actually thinking 4 weeks.
Got it.
If I know people who will be on vacation for the next week and a half, and
That's fair. Okay. All right. Mike? Now we'll talk about the WebAuthn algorithms.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you all for being here at this last session. Okay, there we go. So this specification, as you may recall, the purpose of it is to register some existing algorithms that are used by the web authentication specification, both in the COSE algorithms registry and to make corresponding registrations if they're not already present in the Jose registry. And the draft fulfills a charter point. This is not advancing. So what's happened since we last met our heroes? We had working group adoption of an individual draft. We changed the title as requested by the working group. Addressed review comments, some of which were substantive from John Mattson, Matt Palmer, and Jim Schad. And we did make normative changes. The primary change was to change the Jose curve identifier from P256K, which had been made up and was in use by some early implementations, to SEC P256K1, and that was discussed on the list. I won't repeat the rationale here. We also specified that the signing is done using SHA-256 as the hash function, where previously we'd been silent on the hash function, which was an unintentional omission. There have been no comments received since those things were addressed. This is a very simple draft that primarily has IANA do some actions. So it's my sense that we're probably ready for working group last call, but I'll obviously defer to the chairs in the working group.
When the chairs conversed earlier, we were looking at advancing this. Unless there's any objections here, we'll be in the similar cadence with the other documents. So this would follow the biz drafts on its cadence.
All right, thank you.
Sure. Okay. Oh,
hang on, I was making adjustments in the minutes. One small point. We actually, right now, the registration on the K1 algorithm says IETF recommended. We need to go through some sort of procedure to make sure that's correct, because I think, in point of fact, the answer right now is no. I'm not positive.
And I'm okay with that coming out differently. Just put a comment on the list, possibly as part of the last call, or you could do it right now.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
All right, so with that, that's effectively all of our outstanding drafts and all our outstanding work. Unless there's anything else to talk about at this point, we've got a number of last calls we'll be going through. We expect that we'll do some amount of churn on those, probably very, very minor, like editorial stuff. And then hopefully we can, if we're really lucky, we'll have these into the ISG queue before Singapore. Unless there's anything else we think we ought to be covering, I think this can be a wrap for the day. I see the ADs are quite happy about hearing that. All right, so this is open mic time. You've got going once, twice. Okay, sold. We're all done. Go home.
Okay, for that, I'll take ED evaluation on that one draft.
Thank you.
Right. No, really, people, we're done. You can go home now.
Everybody's still checking their email. Instead of making you send us an email that's well played.
I do gotta admit, this is the first time I've ever seen a room not clear out as soon as it's been told you can go home. Yeah, I did see that. Oh, yeah. Wow, it's kind of a shock. If somebody can bring us the blue sheets. If anybody has not signed the blue sheets, please come to the front.